Went down to the little town of Eureka here in Florida. It's over here in Marion County on the Ocklawaha River. And she spent 3 months living with the Fitty family there. The Fitty family was moonshiners, they were hunters, fishermen, trappers. And she spent those 3 months there living with them. So from that came the book South Moon Under. Golden Apples was another short story that became a book. And then, of course, The Yearling in 1938. Can I look at this way? So the story of The Yearling came from a gentleman that she met over in the big scrub at Eureka. His name was Cal Long, and we actually have his picture on the wall right back here. You see the gentleman holding the gun there? Mm-hmm. Cal told her a story about how he had raised an orphan deer when he was a little boy. And that became the idea of Jody in the book The Yearling, the little boy who raises an orphan deer. There's a little sculpture of Jody right down here on the bottom shelf. His mother on the left, his dad on the right there. So that's what the book of The Yearling is about. Pulitzer Prize winner, Book of the Month winner, and MGM bought the movie rights to that in 1938 for $30,000. That's an unheard of sum back then. The little books in the middle there were put out by Scribner during World War II. There's 3 of her books that they published that they could give to the GIs as they went overseas. They were small enough to keep in their backpacks, so they would be really handy. And the GIs loved it, and they wrote her back all kinds of letters. And she answered over 700 letters back to the GIs during the war. When the Whippoorwill came out in 1940, and it was a collection of some short stories that she'd written up to that point in time. So Jacob Flatter, Gal Youngin, Golden Apples, they're all in When the Whippoorwill. And then, of course, Cross Creek. I told you a little bit about it. Her diary or her memoirs of her life here at Cross Creek. Each story is just, great. It's just a story about some adventure, her life here. And one of the stories, or one of the chapters, is about her cooking. She says, you can criticize my writing all you want, but never criticize my cooking. She was very vain about her cooking. And because of that chapter was so popular, they encouraged her to do a cookbook, which came out in 1942, Cross Creek Cookery. And then her last book, The Sojourner, took her 10 years to write. The reason for that is, in 1943, a lawsuit was filed against her for a chapter that she wrote in Cross Creek about a lady named Zelma Kaysen, her neighbor. Zelma did not like how she was described in that chapter. She filed a lawsuit against her for $100,000. Marjorie actually won the lawsuit here in the local county, Alachua County, but Zelma had a very energetic young lawyer, and that lawyer took the case all the way to the Florida Supreme Court. In 1947, they heard the case. The judge reversed the decision, but gave Zelma only $1 in damages. So I think the judge thought this was kind of a publicity stunt on Zelma's part there. Marjorie did have to pay over $1,000 in court costs, but the big thing was the emotional toll it took on her. She says, I will never write about Florida again. So that last book, The Sojourner, actually takes place on a farm up in Midland, Michigan. And like I said, it took her 10 years to write it. She started in 1943 and never finished it till 1953. Across the top is The Yearling in different languages. It's been translated into over 25 languages around the world. And at the bottom are some books that came out after she passed away in 1953. Some pictures in here, of course, some pictures of Marjorie with her bird dog hat in her garden and sitting on the front porch. This gentleman here is Maxwell Perkins. I was telling the folks earlier when we met down under the barn how Mr. Perkins encouraged her to write about Florida. She had this gift to be able to talk to the locals and just take what she learned and turn it into books. So this is the gentleman who encouraged her to do that. And I guess he knew authors pretty well, because other authors that worked for him were F. Scott Fitzgerald, Ernest Hemingway, Thomas Wolfe, Robert Frost, the poet, all wrote, and he was their publisher or editor there at Scribner. The picture right here was taken by Life magazine in 1941. I don't know if any of you remember Life magazine, but it was a very popular magazine about 20 years ago. They sent a crew down to do a story on Marjorie because MGM was starting to film the movie The Yearling. And so that's her talking to Mr. Julius Bachknight, a gentleman who lived down the road there. And then last, I want to point out a picture of her first husband, Charles Rawlings, over here with the top hat on. Charles only made it here till 1933. He became very discouraged with the Orange Grove and all the challenges of it. And he and Marjorie divorced in November of 1933. With that first book, Jacob's Ladder, she netted $700. Well, she had $500 to pay off some debts. With the other $200, she put in the first bathroom in Cross Creek. None of her neighbors up to this point had ever seen indoor plumbing. Outhouses, which we'll see an example of as we go out the back here today. So she went down to the little town of Citra again, and she found a used bathtub and a used sink for sale. She couldn't find a toilet down there for sale, so she ordered that from the Sears Roebuck catalog. And when it was finished, she threw a party. She filled the bathtub full of ice and drinks. She put a tray of glasses across the sink. She filled the toilet full of flowers, and she had a big party celebrating the first indoor plumbing. Everybody watched her step as we come into this room. She used this room as a guest bedroom. Many of her friends from Scribner Publishing Company actually visited her in Florida and stayed in this very room. This bed here is our oldest piece of furniture in the house. It was given to Marjorie by her carpenter, a gentleman by the name of Mo Sykes. When Marjorie asked him why he was giving away such a beautiful bed, he says, "Ma'am, that bed is too fine for any house I've ever lived in. Besides, every house I've ever lived in is burnt down." So the story of the bed is, it was given to the Sykes family by a gentleman by the name of Major George Fairbanks. Mr. Fairbanks, Major Fairbanks, was an early Floridian. He served in the Civil War as a Confederate major, and then after the Civil War became a very wealthy landowner up here in northern Florida. In fact, the town of Fairbanks, which is between Gainesville and Palatka, is actually named after him. He was a landowner in that part and an Orange Grove owner as well. He wrote a history book late in the 1800s called The History of Florida. I have an example of that right here. This was used as a textbook in a lot of Florida schools in the early 1900s. So Mr. Fairbanks gave the bed to a member of the Sykes family, and then a couple, 3 generations down, Mo Sykes had the bed, and he gave it to Marjorie. So that's why we have the Fairbanks bed here today. All right, let's step out the back here. And there's the outhouse that she had to use before she got her indoor plumbing. This was Marjorie's bedroom here. There was another bathroom off of it. With the success of the Yearling novel, she had the money to put in a second bathroom. It even has a shower there. She writes in one of the chapters of Cross Creek about some of the improvements she made to the house. She laughs about the day that Mo had her stand in the bathtub so he knew where to put the shower head up on the wall there. This gentleman here is Mr. Norton Baskin, her second husband. They actually met at their divorce party in 1933. He was a businessman from down in Ocala, and he ran a hotel down there called the Marion Hotel. So they dated throughout the 1930s and got married in 1941. Shortly after they got married, they pooled their money together to buy a big mansion over in St. Augustine. The mansion was known as the Castle Warden. They turned it into a hotel and called it the Castle Warden Hotel. That building is still there today in St. Augustine. If you visit there, it is Ripley's Believe It or Not Museum. They're on A1A. And so you can still visit the Castle Warden. In addition to that, they bought a beach house in Crescent Beach, Florida. That's about 15 miles south of St. Augustine. And there, Marjorie could go in the summertime when it got too hot here to, right there on the porch with the, the breezes coming in off the Atlantic Ocean. And after World War II, they purchased a home in upstate New York, near Cooperstown, where the Baseball Hall of Fame is. That's where they could, reside up in the Catskill Mountains of New York, where it was much cooler. So other artifacts in here, we've got a typewriter that she would have used back here. She often had to write back here in the bedroom because after she became a famous author, people would stop out on the road out here and actually come up the front sidewalk or front walkway there to get her autograph if they saw her on the porch. This is a baby picture of her, about 18 months old. And there's her graduation picture. That's from the University of Wisconsin in 1918. Nobody has pointed out the wooden bowl. Look up. That is the third wooden bowl. Were you here for the story about the wooden bowls?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, okay. I didn't know when you picked up on the tour there.
My phone. I'm like,
oh, okay.
Great space.
All right. If you guys would step out and join me on the porch there. Yeah, get a picture of that bathroom. Oh, look at the suitcase there with her initials on it.
Okay.
So I turned it around backwards. Around this way. Everybody can read it there, Yeah, it's one of her suitcases. That's the chair.
Yeah, it was on the movie.
I put this in the 2085.
Got it.
I'm sorry. I'm gonna lock you in there.